We have a distinguished panel and a distinguished panelists, as you've seen from before. Our subject this morning is what keeps CEOs up at night and what gets them excited to go to work in the morning. We're going to start negatively, just because why not? So I thought what I would do is just go down the line here and just ask you guys, what was the biggest, most existential nightmare you guys endured last year? And we want details here. I know that it's probably going to be specific to your company, but that's okay. Why don't we start with you, Jim?
Always a great way to start, right?
Yeah, well, let's start in the muck and we'll raise ourselves up.
Yeah, we look across our business across multiple dimensions, but last year the focus area was on talent. Now, we're in the talent business. We only are as good as the people that we bring, and as we've gotten bigger, and with the influx of the millennials and kind of their changing expectations, we realized we had an engagement issue with our people. And so we looked at it pretty significantly, but ended up doing a pretty dramatic shift in how we engage. We put an increasing emphasis on the whole work-life fit issue and put in place a program that dealt with empowerment, but creating flexibility and predictability. Our client demands aren't going to change. They ask us to do important things. They pay us a lot of money. We're not shying away from that, but we wanted more flexibility and predictability in terms of how our people did that. And so we challenged them, empowered them to be part of that design. I also made it very clear to our partners and directors at the beginning of the year, to be on strategy for talent means you support this. And so we went from none of our projects focusing on this topic to having now 70, close to 80% of our projects doing it. And we were able to move the engagement index by 20 points within about 7 months. But it's really a complete fundamental reshift. And as I said, if we lose our people, then that's our business model. And as we get bigger, that's something we have to continue to maintain. Was there a sort of instigation point for you to begin? Yeah, we check, we monitor, we survey, do engagement index and engagement across a broad number of measures and did very well on a number of topics. But the one, as we got big, we started to realize we were losing that connectivity. We're an apprenticeship model. Our business is still that way. Our culture is very important to us. And so at the outset, we started a program called Big Firm, Small Feel. So as you're bigger, you don't lose that connectivity, that smallness. And that's really what led to that. But we were losing on the engagement index. We were getting people that were not as connected. They didn't see kind of where they fit in long term. The millennials and what their expectations were, what they want was very different. And so we had to engage very differently. In fact, we just created a whole new digital tool to push content around our strategy. We gamified it and as a way of connecting differently with our millennials. We probably have 65% of our people are millennials now.
Wow. Greg, what about you?
Well, I'm afraid I took the question far more literally. So I was thinking about how last year, just about a little more than a year ago, company I'm on the board of, Charter, we have a big investment in, was sort of pursuing a transaction with Time Warner Cable, and we were going along and thought we were in space to have a partnership in one way, and the senior exec at Comcast called and said, we just made a deal to buy Time Warner Cable. So it was sort of a reverse of everything.
Oh wait, it's like that. I know, it's like that episode of Dallas where you wake up and you realize it was all a dream.
Well, we'll see what happens going forward, but it would sort of change from, we're going this way, to oops, that's not what we're going to do. So that was probably I took as the X because it was the nighttime. I wasn't asleep, but I was about ready to go to sleep when I got the call.
And to what degree did that alter your strategy over the past year?
Well, it went from one where we were pursuing to one where we were partnering, and that obviously is now folded as well, so who knows? But it was it sort of was a big pivot.
Right.
We thought we were going to be, doing one thing, and we had to do a very different thing.
Alexandra, what about you?
So first of all, I have to say, when I was given this panel as an option, I jumped at it because while I actually do sleep at night, I am somebody who worries constantly about everything in my business. So this fits. My brother, who I work with, has an expression that he constantly tells me, which is everything works out, and I have yet to believe that. Sometimes I tell myself, okay, if this one thing works out, then I'll believe it going forward, but have yet to actually put that into practice. So I'm in the securities business, and it is a rite of passage. Every 2 years, regulators knock on your door and you have an audit. And we for 90 years have always tried to do things the right way. Our name's on the door. It matters. We deal with individual investors. But today, and we're going to talk about this, there are so many regulations that sometimes you get tripped up. And we got tripped up. And I remember it was a Thursday in October, and my general counsel and head of compliance came into my office and told me about a problem, and it was potentially a very big problem. And I spent a good 6 weeks just imagining the horrible possible outcomes while we were working through it. It actually had an amazing ending, which is 150% due to my staff, who built an incredible relationship with the regulators. Our reputation probably helped, but to see the amazing people that I had working for me and how they helped solve this problem, it's great when you know you have the right people and they help you then sleep at night.
That's right.
All right, Aaron.
I'm Aaron Levy, CEO and co-founder of a company called Box. So we had something that was very specific to us, which was a kind of an interesting IPO process, which there are many lessons to be learned, but hopefully nobody in this room has to learn them. So I would say the bigger thing that is representative of our industry right now, where I think collectively we're facing an existential crisis, is certainly on the cybersecurity issue. I know we're going to zoom into that a little bit more, but that for us is that's what we think about every single day, is how do we ensure that we have the right kind of security and the right kind of platform, and then that customers are able to actually be able to adapt to the very, very rapidly changing security environment that obviously could become very existential for any business. So that's sort of what we're constantly dealing with as a technology platform.
So what we heard there were technology, data security, regulatory issues, which really, to some degree, affect both you and talent. And we'll drill down on all those. But before we do that, I mean, Jim, your business is based on hearing CEO nightmares to some degree. Greg, I know you're on a bunch of boards, including Live Nation, Zillow. Do these track? Are these sort of about what you're hearing from other businesses?
I think the point about the war on talent, obviously, particularly in certain technology sectors like a Zillow or a TripAdvisor, the company I'm on the board of, how the costs have escalated, but also the importance of great talent in the technology space is clearly something very sensitive. Data security, a lot of our businesses, in fact, most of our businesses are customer facing and take credit cards. So the sensitivity, we've been less worried about somebody steals your email than the sensitivity if somebody hacks and you get shut down, because if you're not maintaining standards around the quality of protecting those credit card numbers, you could get effectively shut down. So those are both key thoughts and things that are worrisome.
Yeah, I think technology is driving tremendous disruption right now. So cyber underpins every aspect of that. But the last 4 years we surveyed, and the number one issue, and I reflect this in my own business, has been growth, and the number two has been talent. And so companies have had trouble instigating the organic growth engine past the downturn. Part of it, I think, is around the amount of uncertainty. There's this kind of continual uncertainty between political and economic, true globalization, where even small companies are going global, and the emerging customers are in markets that our customers here in the U.S. aren't used to actually access. Regulatory is a big element, and so there's been a reluctance at times to invest. I was very pleased last year where the investment, 2014 was double what it was the year before, and an increased investment in IP in particular, first increase since 2007. The question is, will that maintain? Because I think to get that growth, you've got to get to differentiation, and that requires investment, particularly with the amount of disruption going on.
So you're all in very different businesses, but I thought we'd start with talent. What do you guys see over the last couple of years that's changed in the talent marketplace? Everybody's really talking about this dearth, this challenge of getting the right fit. Is it a skills gap issue? Is it something cultural? I mean, where would you start?
My business is maybe a little bit different because we primarily are in wealth management, so we are attempting to attract financial advisors who want to come and join us, mostly from the big firms. And there is actually an incredible opportunity right now because there are so many people that are unhappy at the big firms. They're over complianced, over red taped, feel like there's pressure to sell product. And while there's still great incentives to move from one big firm to another, they're really looking for new opportunities where there's a culture that they can be happy in. And so we're actually finding that there's great talent available. That really wasn't the case 10 years ago. And to bring technology into it, there's also been a real shift in the way technology is used in the wealth management business. It used to be that the big firms really had a huge advantage. They had hundreds of millions of dollars to put into building their systems, and as small firms, you really didn't have the same type of platform available. But today, those big firms don't want to reinvest in their platforms. But for smaller firms, there's so many new technologies, reporting, investment management platforms, et cetera, that we can go out and rent. So we really have the best of breed. So again, that's another way to attract talent. So it's a really exciting time for us in our business, actually.
What about you, Aaron?
Yeah, so I totally appreciate the sentiment around millennials and how crazy they are.
For the record, you are a millennial, right?
There's a debate over the dates of who qualifies. So depending on the audience, I pretend I am or not. So.
Well, I mean, we could do that.
Yeah.
Do you self-identify?
Self-identify? No, actually, I self-identify as like a baby boomer. So I have a lot of gray hair and
sure.
So we I mean our average age at Box is probably 25, 26, and we have 1,300 employees, so it's a large crop of folks, and the thing that is very apparent is that managing and attracting and retaining this sort of demographic of workforces. I mean, I don't know what it was like before, but for us, it's certainly new and interesting and unique, because especially in Silicon Valley, where what we'll have is we'll have a 22-year-old that comes and joins us, and then within a year and a half, some startup will offer them a VP position, and they'll be getting paid $50,000 more than what they just got out of college, and so there's this constant sort of dynamism with the workforce that is very, very hard to build the right kind of platform and the right kind of environment for people to accomplish what they want and be able to move the way they want, to be able to learn the way they want. So we're constantly facing this on a much shorter time scale. So for the kind of career trajectory that maybe normally you'd say, okay, somebody can accomplish this in 5 or 10 years, we're starting to say, okay, we actually have to have like a 2-year career trajectory if we're going to keep people engaged and be able to retain them. So it's really a compression of the speed at which I think people want to learn and want to do new things, and I think that's certainly impacting nearly every business or industry, and it's just something that I think this new generation is very, very accustomed to in every other part of their life. So when they go to work and it moves so slowly and they can't get ahead very quickly, it impacts their ability to stay engaged.
And is that focused specifically on engineers, or are you seeing this everywhere?
Everywhere.
Really?
Actually, in fact, coincidentally, I would say our engineers are the most stable, because in engineering you're working on a project for 18 months or something, and so there's a deep dedication to that specific project. In other areas, you really just you want to change your environment up, and having to do the same kind of skill for 1 or 2 or 3 years is people are just becoming far more impatient about.
So Greg, you have, I mean, I don't think many people know this, but Liberty, you actually have less than 100 employees, right?
At Liberty itself in Colorado.
So how's the talent crisis impacting you?
Well, I think it's more of an issue at a lot of the companies we're invested in. I think we have the other problem. We probably got a somewhat fat, dumb, and happy sitting in Inglewood, and nobody ever leaves. So we keep getting older. I worry about that, and more renewal that we have.
But fitter. I mean, if Inglewood is a very fit place, right?
The least obese state in the nation. I'm not sure whether we qualify as the least obese company, but the other panel, Hickenlooper, the governor, is a buddy of mine. He'll probably tout the health statistics for Colorado. I see much more of that war for talent at, as I said, some of these companies, and a couple of observations where you want to have that feeder of those people coming in because you want to keep the thing, just as I was talking about Liberty, refreshed. But in a lot of cases, the real muscle's being done by people who've been in 4, 5, and 6 years, and they're actually more cost effective because you actually don't pay them. And with Aaron, your experience, I would say, you're paying the initial
We pay
ones.
people, but
You pay poorly?
no, we just say, I say we pay people.
Oh, you pay people.
Yes,
Good.
yeah.
But my point is, you don't pay. If you look, somebody who's 5 years in, they're awfully leveraged in terms of what you can get out of them relative to what the initial one is and their pay level.
Yes.
So really, that fight in a lot of cases is not that person.
So if you've been at Box for 5 years, that's tenure. So that's you get like a gold watch and everything.
You really are kind of a baby boomer. I drag. Okay.
And when the first person is there for 5 years, they're going to get the gold watch.
We got people at Liberty who've been there 30 years, so I got the other problem.
So in our space, it's interesting. I'll kind of cut it different ways. On the millennial issue, we still get lots of we have 300,000 applications a year. But what we've seen, and we measure everything, right? So where we've seen the uptick in attrition, it's been at the year 2 and year 3, which is unusual. We used to get it at the manager level. People get enough experience, they leverage that to go to another opportunity. And so we spent a lot of time thinking about, part of it is this engagement issue, right? They're all about purpose. They're all about impact. They want to be doing innovative things, cool. They want to see us investing in them as much as they're investing in the future. And so you can do all that, but I also believe that there's this concept of open talent models. And so we're spending time thinking about the concept of colleagues for life. The reality that some of these people are going to go out, they're either going to become clients, but also make it possible for them to come back. Frankly, it's not bad for somebody to go get a couple years working for an industry and then come back into our model. So we're starting to explore with those kind of talent models. Now, the broader economy, the facts are there's a huge talent gap, right? There are, 8.7 million unemployed people, and there's 5 million open positions. And so we've been spending a lot of time with the Aspen Institute, Rockefeller Institute, others, looking at the concept of dealing with upskilling. And how do you get people that come into an organization at entry levels and start to mentor, train, develop them so that they can progress up to fill those jobs? Because there truly is that issue. And you see that particularly in the heartland around skilled manufacturing jobs and high-tech jobs.
So I know if we had some Silicon Valley-based companies here, one of the issues that almost inevitably they would say is immigration, to sort of deal with this issue. You guys didn't say that. Is it not something that sort of tops your list? Or
No, it's high on our list. I mean, I think getting access to the talent, making it easier for people that bring the right skill sets into the country is a major challenge. And if you look at the facts, the people that have immigrated across or get visas end up being some of the most innovative people and starting a lot of the innovative companies that then fuel the engine for the economy. So I think it's a big issue for us.
Yeah. I want to move on to technology, and I do want to start with you, Aaron, just because I know that your business is based, obviously you're a tech business, but you're also a data security business. So if you were to just sort of draw the chart like this, how is it moving as far as the time spent, just the CEO time spent on data security?
Yeah, I mean, that has kind of gone exponential, and especially for our customers where, and I think as sort of proven by some of the events in the past year, security is no longer a thing where you just kind of let your chief information security officer handle it and you just trust their judgment. But actually it's become obviously a CEO conversation, a board level conversation. And I think what the big shift has been, we used to think that compliance and security went hand in hand, and that sort of if you invested in compliance and your risk officer kind of owned that problem, then you were also going to stay secure. And I think what we realized in, whether it was the retail breaches or obviously all the way to the Sony breaches, that compliance really has almost nothing to do with it. In fact, in many cases we see compliance as a distraction to cybersecurity, and that there needs to be a new type of investment that goes specifically toward the cybersecurity issue. And it's just become much closer to home. So, whereas, JP Morgan has always invested in security and they've always known that, I don't think PF Chang's ever realized they had to pay attention to this, and then they lose a lot of credit cards. I bring that one up just that was very personal when PF Chang's gets hacked. But so So we're just seeing in every single industry there's either financial damage, intellectual property damage, or in the Sony case, massive reputational damage, and that makes it very apparent to everyone that you're probably not investing enough, and probably ultimately your culture has to change as well if you're going to stay protected. And a lot of it goes to actually your point, which is in fact a lot of the bigger the organization is, the harder it is to solve this problem, because it's not always just a financial problem. It's actually the culture, the scale, and the legacy platforms that you're running on that are causing you to be less secure. And so we're seeing just a huge modernization in terms of IT to go address this problem. And it's just been interesting to watch that across all the industries.
Yeah.
And can I ask a question following
Yeah,
that?
do it.
So, I look at this and wonder how much of this data security problem is a never-ending battle, and it's to some degree, the taller you are, to use that Australian expression, the tall poppy gets cut. They're not going to hack my emails because I'm not quite as visible as Obama, but they're going to hack Obama's emails. They're going to hack where there's either cause or profile that gets somebody motivated, and it's a very hard problem to stop.
Yeah.
This is a never-ending war. Hackers, viruses, it's the equivalent of viruses, right? Invent the new virus, I think Symantec probably had guys inventing them for a while, but no. But this is a continuing cycle. But it's a continuing cycle that's very hard to solve. I think obviously suggesting that you can solve this, I think is almost futile.
Well, we're more optimistic, but I think the perspective of more and more kind of cybersecurity professionals is a couple of things. One is that well, first of all, I don't think we would have said Sony would have qualified as the tallest poppy. I'm not familiar with that phrase, but
for the North Koreans, it was a very tall poppy.
But who would have predicted that was one of the criteria that could be used to hack your data? So that's the problem. Is everybody has some form of pissing off some nation state or some cyber criminal or some hacker that purely just wants sort of social vengeance or whatever. So that bar, because of how asymmetric hacking is going to be very hard to sort of stay protected, because you're just more closed off than somebody else. I think the couple things that need to happen, though, and actually the U.S. the government and the Obama's administration actually been very thoughtful about this, is we actually need to start to change a lot of the asymmetry. So, for instance, with things like economic sanctions from either countries or corporations that benefit from hacking, that becomes a really interesting device. We need to probably, frankly, just get rid of credit cards as a form of payment, and everything needs to be tokenized. So if you can change the actual value that you get by hacking, then all of a sudden people don't need to hack anymore. So a lot of, obviously we need much better security, but that is clearly a race that the hackers will always win.
And the asymmetry, I think, is a great point, right?
Yeah.
It's sort of like, there's always another terrorist target,
right,
if somebody wishes to be.
Well, it's also easier to destroy than to protect. I mean, one of the things that I would love to know from each of you is whether, given that we're in a new reality, given that whether it's Target, whether it's Sony, JP Morgan, do clients have a reasonable expectation when it comes to data security?
It's interesting. I don't get the question all that often from clients. The SEC has made it a topic for small firms, small registered investment advisors, that they're going to be focusing on cybersecurity. But it's interesting, what matters to clients sometimes isn't exactly what's on the front page. What is, and some people may have read about this, one of the scams du jour is that an email will come supposedly from the client to the financial advisor saying, please wire $200,000 to this bank account, and it's a different account. And while you are required to verify by phone, some well-meaning sales assistant will just make sure that wire happens. And so the firm is responsible for that if that happens. But again, it's interesting that it doesn't come up that often.
Jim, I'm imagining it must come up.
It's you can get any meeting with any CEO any day on cyber, and I would say that The ones that have obviously experienced it are very steeped in it. I think there's still a pretty big learning curve for CEOs and boards on this topic. Our view is that you definitely do have to upgrade the protection, but you also ought to realize no matter how good you are, eventually you're going to get hacked. And so as much time has to be spent preparing for that and how you deal with that and protect yourself effectively once that occurs. So I'd say still coming up the learning curve, but definitely a topic that's high priority.
Yeah, and I think that the cybersecurity and all of the hacking in and of itself is actually not very interesting. The interesting thing is the tension between having to use technology to be innovative and to actually be able to disrupt your industry and move forward, with then the counter balance of the fact that all of these things pose completely new risks and completely new challenges. So if all a company had to do was stay secure, then that wouldn't be very interesting because you would just buy lots of security technology and everything would be solved. It's in the same time when you're being disrupted because of technology that you have to figure out what is the really kind of nuanced way to manage your technology strategy, manage your innovation strategy because of these two risks. And we see this all the time, which is you have a lot of, let's just kind of pick on financial services. You have a lot of very large financial services organizations which have compliance, they have security threats, they have their own baked-in processes and bureaucracies, and then all of a sudden you have all of this disruption happening in the tech world. So how do you actually respond to all of that when you're being pulled in so many different directions? And that's what we tend to see from a lot of our customers in banking or in healthcare or in life sciences is, it would be really easy if we didn't have this regulatory component. It would be really easy if we didn't have this cybersecurity component. And that's actually what a lot of startups, they don't have those issues. So you're being disrupted by companies that don't have that same kind of baggage or that are not encumbered by the same set of factors.
And the technology is actually driving you to things that want you to have increased connectivity, increased openness, increased access points, all of which then need to be protected. And so it's almost a counterbalance to what's there.
It's the inverse of Metcalfe's law, right? The more the network, the more nodes, the more valuable, the more vulnerable too.
Yeah, the more risk.
I mean, one of the things, just to be clear about this, is that not all breaches are created equal. And I think last year, the magazine I work for exposed two very big but very different ones. One was a NASDAQ hack by the Russians, which was very much an IP hack. It was structured to go in and figure out how the market actually worked and was built and take all that data out. The other was Target, where very much the target was consumer data. And what's interesting in reporting on both of those stories is that we discovered part of what made each of those breaches bad, and not just bad but worse, was that the companies had kept more data than they ever needed. Are you seeing people begin, we're now 10, 15 years into the data revolution. People always thought we're just going to keep it all and we're going to figure it out. Are you seeing people beginning to rethink that strategy and jettison some of the wholesale keeping of data?
Well, but this is back to that other point. How are you going to compete with Google or Facebook if you have less data than them?
Jettison the data is crazy. That's treasure trove of information. Yeah, I think it's the opposite. People are wanting to keep. Back to the point, people are wanting to keep more data, figuring they're going to, even if I don't understand it, I'm going to look back and figure out what to do with it down the road. I don't see that happening yet.
I think people are putting more of an emphasis on, first of all, people want to own data and figure out what to do with it and how to monetize it. But I do think it's starting to have a data strategy that starts to add that component in about what I really need to keep is something that is starting to emerge.
Yeah, I mean, certainly with emails, I've spoken to a number of CEOs who moved up their incinerator date. Yeah. A year out, 2 years out, depending on the regulation.
But that's mostly about litigation.
Well, it's litigation,
not about hacking.
Well, no, but it is about embarrassment as well.
Yeah.
But the more that's out there, the tougher it's going to be.
You could also just say fewer things in your emails that could be embarrassing, but that.
Right.
That's hard.
The chairman of our company
stop.
has a policy, 2-word emails. Once I got 3 words, but.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you can't, if you. Don't call, nod, don't
right.
nod. I mean, we all know that, and yet the technology makes it so easy to say horrible, horrible things about your clients and your peers, and yet every day we see it. So
this is an existential CEO crisis. So you can't say horrible things anymore. So
well, that is tough for CEOs.
But the challenge is how are you supposed to compete if you're a transportation company or a retailer or a healthcare company against somebody who has an expertise in managing large sets of data and is actually building their product with that data as a core kind of value proposition of the product, if like you can't prescriptively or you can't prescriptively know what data you always are going to want in your application or your service. So that's why we've moved more toward collect more and then create value around it, and that's what's creating these situations where people have information that you never thought they had. And it's again, that creates a competitive asymmetry between those that are really regulated and those that are just starting up, where they can create better value propositions because they don't have the same data privacy constraints.
So to roll it all together, right? If you're the established older guy, you're more challenged because you've got more regulatory scrutiny likely. You've got more reputational risk if you fail on this stuff. You're more worried about, what's the cost of making a mistake on data privacy or getting hacked. So all of those things suggest, that's back to my point about the tall poppy. It's visible. It's all these problems. That's why it's a little scary. It's another form of kind of self-regulation that causes, I think, more established firms to be less aggressive. Maybe for good reason, but they've got real challenges either way.
And this is why Silicon Valley is so dangerous right now, because you have so many companies now not just going after the tech industry anymore, but actually going after each specific industry without any of that baggage, without any of that kind of being encumbered by all those factors. So this is the thing that ultimately it all sort of boils up to as CEOs, especially for our customers, is you've been around 100 years, you've built processes and behaviors and investments and all the regulatory issues you face, and then all of a sudden a completely new approach to your industry emerges, and you just can't respond quickly enough.
So I want to move from competitors into regulators, which is another form of a handbrake. Alexander, for you, is the burden with regulation the just sheer quantity of it? Is it the unpredictability of it?
It's the quantity of it, and I say that actually thinking of poor J.P. Morgan and Bank of America and Goldman and everybody else, because J.P. Morgan has 10,000 people in compliance, but for a small firm, you have a limited compliance staff, and there are regulations that come up constantly that affect your business. I sort of compare it to, you have a fishing net and you're fishing for tuna, and all of a sudden you've got a dolphin in there. And it ends up affecting your business in a way that it's not supposed to. And there's nothing you can do about it. And when you try to solve the problem, because you're looking at it from a business perspective, you feel, sorry, no pun intended, like you're in a box.
No,
and
I like
you
that
keep
pun.
trying to
That's
turn
fine.
around and find a solution, and the box just keeps getting smaller and smaller. Sorry, I changed analogies from fish to boxes. But I'll give you an example. There's something that came up last year, well, it's been around for a while, called the Muni Advisor Rule. And it was designed to prevent financial advisors to municipalities from giving bad advice to municipalities and also selling them securities at the same time. But what ended up happening was it caught every institutional firm who was selling securities to municipalities that weren't doing any banking business, weren't involved in it at all. And you could not sell securities if you were investing bond proceeds. This is getting a little complicated, sorry. And we always take a very conservative line, and we had just hired somebody to build this business for us, and there was no solution. Now, luckily, we ended up exiting one part of the business, so it worked out for us. But it's a law that was written that was never intended to have the effect that it had. But instead of the regulators going back and saying, why don't we look at this and change it? It was like, well, the rule's a rule. So that's the type of thing that just when you just want to go nuts, because it's just common sense, and common sense doesn't prevail. But then on top of it, it's just the massive amounts of regulations. And I always laugh sometimes when it's like Rule 17A43B. And I think, it's amazing that you even got to Rule 17A43B, that there is that massive amount, when it really should just start from protecting individuals and protecting the financial system.
That's 1743A.
No, they've added B.
Okay, no, I know, but the first one was supposed to do that. And
Right,
then
exactly.
the B got added.
Exactly. So it's very frustrating as a small firm.
So, Greg, I mean, you brought up the Comcast example as having a huge impact on your business last year and all the things that you were thinking about. Specifically in communications, do you feel like regulation is anywhere near caught up to what's actually happening on the ground?
Well, I think there are a couple of issues. The one that is most frustrating, we're somewhat of a bystander who's getting shaken out of what happened with Comcast, and that'll change our world. But the one that's most frustrating is, that took 12 months for a regulator to get to this point. We bought in a swap about, 5-7 years ago now, we owned a big hunk of News Corp when it still had Fox inside of it. We swapped that block of stock back to them for control of DirecTV. By the definitions of the FCC, that's adding media diversity. Why? Because we were less concentrated than they were. So it was a positive transaction. It took 14 months to get it done. Something which, seems to be not that difficult. If you deal with the SEC, and this is not a criticism, it's just a fact. All of these things take time. We do a lot of tax-related items, private letter rulings. So one of the things that's probably the most debilitating things about our business is you propose something, you think of something, you think you can execute it on, and then you're in the mode of wait. You're waiting for a lot of things to get done in cycles, and that's the most frustrating. We've announced it, the market's seemingly, and when you finally close, they're like, wait a minute, I thought that got done, X number of years ago. So that's probably the most frustrating thing to me, is just the cycles, how slow they are.
Yeah. Jim, do you see, obviously your business is not regulated, but you deal with regulated business all the time.
Right. And I want to have the global dimension in there too, which is when what's happened in the U.S. is not aligned with the standards elsewhere. You end up having multiple regulators and there's a lot of duplication. The other thing is, as we start to see, the business model evolve, the concept of ecosystems and complex partnerships where you're building alliances and different kinds of ventures in ways that haven't been done before, the regulatory barriers that even we're running into as a result of that is very, very complicated. And if you want to get into those kind of partnerships, the regulations were built 100 years ago that just really don't apply to the new kind of emerging economy. So that would be the second point.
The other thing as well, and this is certainly the case with Dodd-Frank, where you have Congress involved in writing regulation when they don't really understand the business at all. And certainly post-financial crisis, it wasn't like they appreciated the input of Wall Street, who actually knew the business. So, that's just been an added issue. And Dodd-Frank is also one of those regulations that ended up catching a dolphin in it when you look at all of the corporations that their FX business got caught up in Dodd-Frank, which wasn't certainly intended originally.
So before this turns into a wake, I thought maybe I would ask you guys, we're going to open it up to questions in a few minutes, but what in the conditions around business in the past couple of years has changed to get you excited? What do you see that's made your lives easier, more interesting, opened up greater strategic opportunities for your businesses?
I think this is the most interesting time to be in business since I left business school in '87. And a lot of it's driven by the innovation in technology, the disruption on one end, but the possibilities driven by some of the kind of advanced exponentials is, I think, unparalleled. We'll take senior executives and expose them with a partnership we have to some of the leading thinkers on exponentials. And the first, after a day or two, the first thing is, oh shit, what have I got myself into here? Because first of all, they didn't understand what these technologies were, and then they start to realize that if they don't do something different, that it's going to dramatically affect their business. And then the next step is, okay, based upon that, now how do we actually start to leverage that? So you have out of that emerged completely new business models, right? So we had one food manufacturer exposed to additive manufacturing or 3D printing and realized that there's a whole new consumer model that they could do leveraging that technology that just didn't exist before. And so I think it really, and this was the part around investment, what worries me most, the big companies that are entrenched and it's complicated, I think, don't invest at your peril, because you do have the small startups that are coming after you. And I go talk to them, and their explicit objective is to take down the incumbents. And the incumbents have tremendous brand, they have IP, other things, but if they don't make the investment in some of these new technologies, they miss the opportunity. But I think the opportunity is exciting. The things that we're getting into are things we wouldn't even have thought about a few years ago. We're talking about essentially building a digital consulting agency to really help companies imagine and think how to leverage the technology and drive that through. The analytics and what you can do with that, cognitive analytics and the things that drives for your business, I think are great. Engagement with customers. So I get excited by it.
What about you, Greg?
Well, I don't, want to be completely redundant, but obviously the most interesting is, and it is most scary, is the technology change. So I give a talk in which I rudely stole from one of the guys who worked for me about how if you looked at the movie business and you say, I wanted to display a movie in 1979, I wanted to play it on my personal device. The IBM computers that just to store it would have cost $500,000. The transmit it would have cost 20 grand. To the playback device would have been a $10,000 unit or something. And now we're talking about where the storage is pennies, the transmission in terms of what it actually, the marginal cost of transmitting it is pennies, and the display device is probably your already purchased phone that's your low-end smartphone's $100 or something. And then you roll forward and imagine, okay, 25 more years of Moore's Law, you won't be able to count how cheap all these things are. It won't be worth the cost and the effort to count them. And the impact that has is mind-numbing. And what happens is it's all waves, right? So another slide is how fast all these waves have accelerated, and the reason why they accelerated so much is you're leveraging off the last one. You're standing on the shoulders of that which went before. So if you say, oh, I roll out the internet, and that's roll it on top of a lot of digital devices, and then I roll out smartphones, and that's on top of the internet, and all these things are waves that get built up on top of each other. So not only do you have the technology accelerating, but you have the cumulative impact of technologies and the disruption. So that's the opportunity, which is also one that just is going to continue to rip apart different businesses. The media business is one that's been ripped apart as much as anybody. Think about what's happened to newspapers, or think about what's happened to the music business. Think about we're watching start to begin to happen to the TV business, which was about the most protected, both because of the continuing nature of increased demand. Video is a pretty addictive product. People had more time to watch it, and the business model was very powerful. But even now, it's beginning to shake, and that you just know. You can see these cycles come through, and that's the opportunity and the threat. And frankly, the most of the time that we spend, senior team, is thinking about, okay, what's digital going to do to the impact of this business? Maybe has the market overreacted to it? Because in some cases, we were able to buy things or invest in things when the market said that's going to get wiped, and it actually didn't. Yeah, everything gets wiped in the end, but there was a lot of money to be made and a lot of opportunity in the interim. And so trying to estimate, is this going to get killed quickly? Is it going to die a long, slow death? Has the market has underestimated this or overestimated that? That's an awful lot of what I spend time doing.
So I'm going to talk about something more internal and qualitative. Just for some background, my grandparents founded our original business in 1925. It was a municipal bond firm for many years. I ran it, sold it, worked for the parent company, sold to Merrill Lynch, restarted the company in 2007, and for 7 years hung on for dear life. Tough times through the financial crisis. And then about a year ago, I was joined by a guy who had been on Wall Street for 40 years, was with Sandy Weil for 1969 to 1998, and then took Neuberger Berman public, and he wanted to come and join me and help build Lebenthal into the wealth management firm on Wall Street. And so we've spent the last year building Lebenthal. We've quadrupled our assets under management. We've grown our capital markets business. And I love building, and to have somebody like that with me who's got experience and really could have done a lot of different things and has run a lot of big things pick me and pick my family name, my family firm, of which I am so intensely proud, and rebuilt, which I was probably entirely nuts to do, is incredible. And I really just pinch myself when I go in and see him in the office. And our 5-year plan is to go public, and we're going to do something big, and that's just makes me feel really, really excited about what the future is going to bring.
So I guess maybe two categories of things are very exciting. So one is just what maybe the future could look like as maybe we have to wait 5, 10, 15 years, but there's some really cool stuff happening that all feels. It's like if this was 5 years ago, it would all feel incredibly impractical, but now we've seen the precedent be set where it can become real. So you have obviously everything that's happening in self-driving cars. There's a company that has a electric self-flying airplane, personal airplane. So it's a little personal pod that flies you around about 150 miles an hour. That's a new technology that some people are working on in the Valley. Hyperloop. So that was the thing that Elon Musk kind of 2 years ago or a year and a half ago put out as a PDF. But it turns out now there's a company emerging that is building the Hyperloop, and their first test is going to be trying to build it from LA to Las Vegas. And it can go up to about I don't know why that's the first test.
Well, because if you're going to gamble.
Right, you might as well do it very quickly. Yeah. But that can go at about like 1,000 miles an hour as an example, and so some all new technology there. I mean, things that are happening in energy, things that are happening in robotics. So just like the foundational technologies that are going to completely change how the world works and how small the world is and how much we can communicate and how connected we can be. We're just starting to see now the new baseline. So it's not going to be a smartphone. It's not going to be a watch. It's not going to be a computer. We're going to be able to communicate in all new ways. There's a demo of the latest Oculus, which puts you in a complete 3D world, and it's indistinguishable from your own ability to perceive the real world. So we're just starting to see now the basic sort of foundational building blocks of the next set of technologies that will matter a lot in the next decade or two, and it's really exciting stuff. And then what's also, I think, happening that's interesting is you have finally incumbents that are adapting to these trends. And so we're seeing more and more partnership with companies that are traditionally outside of the Valley, traditionally not kind of seen as technology companies, partnering up with the Silicon Valley. And so that becomes more, you mentioned open talent. I mean, I think we're going to even see just more open innovation between sort of what are the unique assets of this industrial company or of this retailer or of this life sciences company, and how can they partner with new technology firms that are going to be able to help them innovate. So we're starting to see more and more of that model reach escape velocity, which is, I think, really important for the sustainability of a lot of these companies. And then maybe the final thing is from a jobs standpoint, which is interesting. I think there's another trend in the Valley, which is there's less talk about there's actually, I would say there's more innovation that is net job creating as opposed to deflationary from a job standpoint. So yes, there's a lot of noise about robotics and what that's going to do. But if you look at Uber as an example, I mean, they're on track to have 1 million people that are getting an income because of that. And if you look at all of these there's a whole set of new categories of technologies that are emerging that are going to create lots of jobs. And so it's not the sort of Silicon Valley trying to take over the world and make it so we just have, we all sort of just live in our 3D world. And
yes, it is, Aaron.
And watch the robots.
I know, but I'm not supposed to say that.
Right. No, that's the master plan.
Uber, I'm investor Uber. I think it's great. I think this job creation argument's complete malarkey.
Yeah. Okay, wait, on their end or my what I just said?
Their end.
Yeah. Why?
I think that this is the one hand giveth and one hand taketh. I don't think this is a net creator here.
I think if you go to some of the smaller cities and take UberX, you will see that.
Sure.
Wait, where is it taking it from?
Cab drivers.
No, they're already like 3 or 4 times bigger or something than the taxi market ever was in SF. So it just shifts at like the work that somebody used to do by driving themselves to now an actual job for somebody else.
And if we can have less cars because we're more efficient in asset utilization, there'll be less cars sold, and that'll mean that there'll be less car people building cars. I think this is generally, it's a little bit of, this is giveth and a taketh.
Yes, so that's a long-term impact of this. But those jobs will eventually go to some other part of the economy that is net new because of
I think innovation's good and it'll create jobs in the long term. But I think the arguing that any one of these things individually creates jobs is a pretty tough argument, because usually it's a taketh and a giveth.
As usual, the Uber panel would.
Well, it's extreme. Is there an Uber panel?
No,
okay, got
but
it.
every conference actually should have it.
I have a question. Do you think that the landscape for women in the Valley will change as a result of the Ellen Powell trial?
I don't think as a result of the Ellen Powell trial. I think as a result of the overall shift in conversation over the past couple of years. I think that the Ellen Powell trial is probably a bit of a sort of one-off relative to the overall change that's happening, which is you have far more female founders, you have far more attention paid by recruiting and retainment functions within organizations. I think there's an overall, what Sheryl Sandberg has done to just create the conversation, I think a lot of those things are making it top of mind. And the Ellen Powell thing, I think, is more of a sort of one-off legal situation that hard to sort of learn too much from. But no, I think this will be another area that changes pretty significantly in the Valley over the next 5 to 10 years.
So we're going to open it up to your questions. There's a mic in the middle there.
Ideally about Uber and job creation.
Only about Uber, yes.
Okay. Or Ellen Powell.
Or you can just shout it and I'll repeat it.
Sure. Caroline Fairchild, editor with LinkedIn. Jim, I wanted to ask you something that Aaron said earlier about kind of project-based work. He said because the work that his engineers are doing is project-based, that he found it, excuse me if I'm misquoting you, but it's easier to retain them because it's project-based and it's changing.
Yeah, it's a little bit more retentive. Yeah.
A lot of the work that your consultants are doing is project-based, so I'm interested if you're seeing the same thing, if it's easier to retain them or how it's different.
Yeah, I think it is, because you have a lot, at our place, you have a wide playing field, right? So you can over your career, you can do multiple different things. You can have multiple careers within a career.
Right.
But the bar, what they want is they want to see the investment. They want to do cool stuff, right? So innovation, we started investing in innovation about 4 years significantly because we knew we had to get on the cutting edge, not only for our clients, but for our people. And so it's got to be the right kind of project. But the variety matters. Having some self-determination matters. Titles don't matter. Seeing impact, value, those things matter. That's what's starting to come across.
Yep.
Are your reasons for firing people different now than a couple of years ago?
Is that addressed to anyone specifically?
Let's go with Jim.
I think it's, first of all, we have phenomenally talented people that we hire. Like I said, the bar to get in is hard. So generally, it's a fit issue more than anything else. So we've some really talented people, but are they really cut out for being a consultant? But I think we are starting to see even more so a need to retool, a willingness to retool and re-engineer who you are. There's so much change occurring. Just put it simply, somebody that's come into our technology business is moving to the cloud, it's moving to digital, it's moving to advanced analytics. And so for our people that have grown up in technology, maybe focused on some of the big ERP platforms, they have to be willing to make that investment. Now we are too, with them, because I'd rather take a really good employee and figure out how to do that. But I think there is going to be, both from business and the employee, a willingness to do that over time. Otherwise, it will start to have people that leave for different reasons.
Yep.
Question for Greg. You were talking earlier about the pace at which business models disintegrate. Is it overhyped? Isn't it? Specifically with respect to cable and cable networks and the bundle. Reading in the press is about OTT and skinny bundles. People can't afford pay TV anymore. Your company is in the process of, RDL is part of Charter and is in the process potentially of getting even much bigger. How do you see hype versus reality as it relates to, quote unquote, the disintegration of the cable bundle and the current dual stream revenue model that companies have?
So an old boss of mine, Bill Gates, used to say that people always overestimate how quickly change will occur and underestimate the long-term impact, and I think that's probably true. I don't think the cable bundle is going to crash in the next 6, 12 months the way people think in quite the same way. But I do think a bunch of things are happening. You're already seeing ratings declines for lots of kinds. Traditionally for network television, now you've seen a lot of ratings declines for for cable networks that are probably impacting advertising in the near term. And advertising has been the real extra juice that's paid for high quality content, so that's a potential strain. The other part of this is when you don't see ubiquity, if you start splitting these bundles and people had in this package, not this package, it doesn't mean so much for the affiliate fees as much as it means you don't have a scale audience for those ad dollars, right? It's not ubiquity in the same way that it's been. So I think that's how that ad model is going to work is very interesting. I'm less the subscription pay model. Yeah, I think you'll see varieties of bundles, and it is in part created by the fact that you're looking at modest TV household formation at best. There are cord cutters, cord nevers, who are have a different view about what their need for cable is. So you haven't seen that, and that all of those are saying is you're starting to see the lag in the beginnings of that, but advertising will be the first part that feels it. I think the bigger issue for the long term is, why are we going to have half-hour and hour content shows? It's interesting to me that Netflix, which got built around technology, most great distribution platforms have been built around borrowing or buying or creating great content. You were DirecTV, you had Sunday Ticket, you had when the NFL, or the NFL's often been the vehicle, TBS leveraging Sunday night NFL going back. But Netflix was relatively unique. They got built around great technology. It's interesting to me now that they're investing an awful lot in original programming, but in these half-hour and hour format shows, I'm not sure that's where the momentum is. You watch your child, if you have that age, a teenager, they're not digital translators, they're digital natives. They're happy to watch on smaller devices. Now Malone thinks they're all going to get to big devices someday. John and I argue about this. But they're happy to watch for 3 minutes, 5 minutes. And will the formats be that long-term format? Yeah, some cases, but a lot of it's going to be short-term format. So what does that say about the bundle at all? And if you look at how much viewing is happening on YouTube, how much viewing is happening on Snapchat, how much viewing is happening on Instagram, or that suggests to me that a lot of this about the bundle, and that maybe it's missing the point. That's like the deck chairs on the Titanic. Roll forward, and what's really going to happen in the short-form content, and what's going to happen in terms of small screens and what people who are 12 today, 15 today, what they're going to do. Very different than what I probably would do or you might do.
I think we have time for one more. Okay.
A question to the panel. What, if anything, are you doing to impact the regulatory environment? Is Dodd-Frank the law of the land? Once a deal gets announced, do you just kind of lay back and just wait on the regulators to come through with something?
Well, I was on the board of SIFMA, the Securities Industry Financial Markets Association, and at the time of Dodd-Frank and the financial crisis, they actually were extremely involved, and even with the lack of desire for input, Tim Ryan, who was running SIFMA at the time, did an absolutely tremendous job of working with the regulators and working with Washington to help craft the legislation. There is an ongoing effort by SIFMA to continue to do that. And certainly in the municipal bond arena, which is still one of my specialties, because there's a constant threat of taxing municipal bonds. There is an active effort to educate the federal administration that taxing municipalities is probably just going to increase everybody's costs. So yeah, we do, and it's very important to be engaged.
I would agree. I mean, it's we realize that fighting them probably is not the right answer, and that there is a reason for regulation. It's just the appropriate regulation, and we're much better off spending time with them in earnest, trying to help shape it the right way, so it accomplishes the objective, but at the same point, it's still business friendly. And you don't do that unless you actually spend the time and invest. So we spend a fair amount of time doing that.
Thank you all for coming. Let's have a round of applause for our panelists, please. And we now yield to lunch, so off you go.